Carli, thank you so much for joining us back on the podcast. I just gave your intro a little bit, but why don't you tell us just more about who you are, just a quick intro. And guys, again, if you want more of Carli's story, go back and listen to our episode on comparison, because she dives into like her testimony into a fuller extent there. But yeah, just give us a little bit about yourself and who you are.
Yeah. Hi, Megan. Thank you so much for having me back. I'm so excited to be here again. I'm an author and an entrepreneur, and I'm planning to release my first young adults novel this fall. So that's like my really quick intro. But like Megan said, you can go hear more if you want to on the other episode.
I love it. I'm so excited for this book. Disclaimer too, I apologize if you guys hear sniffles and or sneezing. Allergies are just hitting me hard today. So I just want to put that disclaimer out there. I will try to edit out everything I can, but who knows? So yeah. Anyways, I am so excited for this conversation today. And we are talking about discovering purpose in your singleness. So a few weeks ago, I'm going to be transparent, we had an incredible episode on singleness, but it was from two married women, one who got married in her 30s and myself. And I got a bunch of women who were like, I loved this episode, but I also got a few who were like, okay, how about you bring somebody on who's single right now to talk about singleness, rightfully so, 100%. And so it was honestly one of my hesitations in posting the last episode, but it was so good. And again, great feedback from it, and people were encouraged, which was great. But I am just so excited for this conversation because too, we're not really going to be talking too much. We are going to dive into it a little bit, but too much about how to really handle desires of a relationship, but more so taking the season of or life and looking at it like, wait a minute, and as you've said to me, we've had this conversation before, you're single and you couldn't be doing some of the things that you're doing right now if you were married, and so you can serve Jesus in ways that they can't. You've talked about that before. So we're going to be talking about discovering purpose in your singleness. And I just want this conversation to be something that tackles it. And I feel like in the church, and especially in society, but even in the church, we really idolize relationships. It can be the end all be all. We covet it. We strive for it. We think it's the after to our sad before. It's always in those reels on Instagram, like how they became happy because they're in a relationship. We expect it to make us happy, etc. But I want this conversation to hopefully shift that perspective to be like, okay, believers specifically, some are in relationships and some are single, but both are on an equal playing field and both have purposes. So how can we forget our striving for relationship and just discover purpose specifically today in singleness? Anyways, so do you agree with me? Do you feel like we idolize relationships? What are your thoughts on that whole rant there?
Yes. Well, I 100% agree with you. Our culture obviously idolizes relationships, but it's so crept into the church as well, where it's kind of become I can't walk in this thing God's called me to without a husband, or I can't do this thing as well as I could if I was married, like my friends, and we're gonna.
No, so good. Sorry.
Yeah. And I think like it's very obvious that it's happening, but at the same time, it can be so easy to be caught in that trap as well, where it's like, if I don't have that thing, like I want it too, because look, everybody else is quote unquote happier or better. But I think it happens like in a lot of ways because Satan loves to take something God made to be good and twist it and pervert it and make it something God never intended it to be. And I think that's what's happened with relationships, right? Like we want a relationship because a guy is a tangible thing. But if Satan can get us to like start seeking that guy more than we seek God, then we're living in idolatry. And he's really happy if we're living in idolatry because we can't fulfill the purpose of what God's called us to do at that point. And we're like, if we always are believing that like I'm not enough because I'm single, or I'm missing something, or I'm never going to fulfill my purpose if I don't have a man in my life, then how can God satisfy me? Because I'm looking at something else to satisfy me rather than him.
Yeah, I think that's so good. I love that you put it in the perspective too, like how Satan loves to take a good thing, like something that God made to be good, and twist it. And so we are so discontent with it. And even in scripture, like it talks about like really holding up singleness to an extent that we don't in the church, sadly, and also just in society at large. So I love that you put it in that perspective. Like it's not something, the Lord calls like marriage a good thing, like
Yeah.
he gave Eve to Adam. That was great, like all this. But singleness is also a good thing that the Lord has. And so I just love that you brought it in that perspective and how Satan really wants to attack that because it's something the Lord uses.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And it's something we have to like guard ourselves against because it's
Yeah.
easy to fall into that place of idolatry. Like it's really easy to fall there because it's tangible, really. And I think tangible things are easier to we want to take hold of it. It's a guy can be in person with us, but God is not visible to us. So it's like it can be hard sometimes to transition our thinking and being like, oh, God is actually worth my pursuit more than any man possibly could be.
That's really good. I love that. Just realizing too, like just because something seems more tangible doesn't mean it's more worth it than,
Mhm.
the Lord. Okay, so because this is an episode on singleness, can you talk about the pros of singleness straight from the Bible? Like what are some things that you find in scripture that are, we've talked about how it is a good thing that the Lord has. So where do we find that
Yeah.
in scripture? Yeah.
Yeah. So I think like the most obvious chapter is First Corinthians 7. Paul kind of just goes into this long thing about marriage and singleness, and he kind of starts it off like right away. Like it's better if everyone just is single like me. Like that's the best. If you can't do it, then fine, get married. That's pretty much like this is the Carly summation of what Paul is saying, but it is like kind of what he's saying. Like he's like, there's things that you can do when you're single that you can't do if you're married. And I think he really kind of comes in and hits that hard in verses 32 through 40 and specifically 32 to 35. And he's like, I would want you to be without a care. He who's unmarried cares for the things of the Lord and that how he may please the Lord, but he who is married about the things of the world, how he may please his wife. And talks about the difference between a wife and a virgin. And the unmarried woman cares about the things of the Lord, how she may please him wholly, both in body and spirit. And she who's married cares about the things of the world, how she may please her husband. And this I say for your own profit, not that I may put a leash on you, but for what is proper and that you may serve the Lord without distraction. So he's pretty much like, if you're married, you're going to get distracted by your spouse. And really, there should be a consideration of your spouse. Like
Right.
if Megan totally ignored Donnie, that would be a huge issue. Like Donnie, it wouldn't be good for their marriage. It wouldn't be honoring to the Lord. It would be like a super big problem. Like if she's just like, Donnie, like I'm going to go do all these things for Jesus and I'm going to ignore all of your needs, all of the things like God's called me to as a wife, because like it's better for me to serve God, quote unquote, in this way. That would be sin. That would be wrong. So she does need to care for Donnie, but for me, like I don't have a husband. So I can be like, oh, I'm going to stay late at church. I'm going to go do these things. I'm going to invest time, energy, money in a way that really wouldn't be good for me to do if I was married. There's something I can do without a distraction. And it's not that I'm better than Megan or Megan's better than me. It's just that we have a different place in calling. And right now, because I'm single, I can do things without a certain type of distraction that I would have in my life if I was married. Does that make sense?
100%. I love the way you worded that. I feel like I have been trying to verbalize it in like get that out on paper in the exact way that you just did that. I think it's so good. And like you said too, it's not that either, person is like better or worse than the other, but it's like serving the Lord in different ways. But like you said, like that if you don't have a husband or, yeah, I guess I was going to say relationships, but I guess specifically a husband, there are ways because you don't have that like quote unquote distraction, like that you can serve the Lord differently. And like just practically too, I would love for you to dive into what that could look like. Like you mentioned staying late at church, like whatever it
Right.
is. I'm just trying to think, I guess even going on missions trips, just like
Right.
things. Yeah.
Yeah. So even just like, okay, if I want to have girls over to my house or even have somebody stay here late at night or be over or whatever, I can do that. I don't have a husband that I'm like, sorry, buddy, you got to go like in your own home, hide away while I'm spending this time, ministering to these younger women or whatever. Or if there's just like, even just taking certain risks and walking in things that
Yeah.
if I had a husband or a family, I'd have to really consider that and count that cost. Like, is it worth investing my time, my energy, my finances in this endeavor? Not that we can't do those things if we're married, but I just think there's a greater freedom to do it in our singleness, because it's only me, it's not, I'm not like looking to, it's not like I'm going to take someone else down this road with me. You know what I mean? Like, there's just a freedom kind of to make certain decisions that I couldn't make if I was married, I
Yeah.
hope that's making sense.
No, that makes absolute perfect sense. And I think it really almost stirs up kind of excitement for that season, because you're like, oh my gosh, like I can do all of these things right now that
Yeah.
I think we really lose when we are just sitting there waiting for the next, if it's a season, you know what I mean? That next
Yeah.
season, like if we're just waiting for a spouse. And again, and this is something I've talked about too on the podcast before, like the Lord has promised us so many different things, but a spouse is never one of those things.
Yeah.
This is us. And so like, and we talk about, and I've done it too, like singleness is a season, but sometimes it's not the case. And I feel like if we're constantly, whether it's a season or not, looking for that relationship, then we are missing entirely what the Lord could have for us right now.
Yeah.
Because it kind of ties into our last episode, then comparison, and we're looking to the right and to the left, and we're forgetting to run the race that's set before us right now
Yes.
today. And so I think the way that you have talked about it and described it just really kind of stirs up this motivation to be like, okay, whether it's a season or whether it's a life, like I have to take advantage right now today of like what the Lord can do in my life that maybe he can't do in my married friend's life, and that too. Yeah. So just jumping off of that, can you are currently single, and from our conversations about your upcoming book and your new career ventures, and the way you serve in church, you have said confidently that you wouldn't be able to do what you are doing right now if you were married. So can you elaborate that a little bit more on your own life specifically, and I guess just give us the 411 for other single women out there who are listening, just on your singleness, where you're at, all of that.
Sure. So I think some of it ties into like some of what we've already been talking about, even just like,
Yeah.
okay, there's ways that I can invest my time and my energy and my life right now without the distraction of being married or having kids. I have some like incredible friends who are married with little kids, and some of them have actually looked at me and been like, I'm so excited about what you're doing, but I could never do
Yeah.
that in my life right now. Like, you actually said to me, like, take what God's given you and really like invest in this right now, because you couldn't do it if you were in my position. So I've actually been told that by some of my married friends, but also just like recognizing for myself, like it's a lot of energy to write a book or to promote it and to do the marketing and to like walk as an entrepreneur, which Megan, you know very well the entrepreneurial part of it. So like, but there's something I can do right now as I'm working to build this foundation, that I can invest time. I can be up really late at night and not be disturbing anybody else. I can do these things because I have the freedom in my singleness to do it. Like, and I think sometimes it's just like that practical. And in other ways, it's the spiritual end of things too. Like, the fact that I can do things with young women at any time of day or night. I can take calls, I can go places, I can stay late at church, I can do some of that stuff that I would feel bad taking away from a husband if I had that in my life right now, or a relationship. Like, I have not very much time on my hands to give to another. To like, if I had a spouse, I wouldn't be able to give him the time he deserved because of the things that I'm doing in my life right now. So just like understanding that like this is a season that God's given me, and I want to sow everything into the season possible that I can right now. And like just even thinking of like Anna in the Bible, like Luke, when the old lady who sees Jesus right at the very beginning, right? So she was married for 7 years, but then it says like a widow for 84 years or something like that. And she spent all of her time like serving God in fastings and prayers night and day. And she couldn't have done that if she was married, and it's that kind of thing where it's like, I can do certain things that just because I have time, I can invest into it. And like again, it's not like, oh, I'm better than anybody who's married. It's just that, no, my life is different. I have a different calling and a different purpose right now. And it's good. It's not bad. It's really, really good.
Yeah, I love that. And I think notably too, like in your own life, you minister to and meet with, a ton of girls on the regular. I am one of them, that we are like meeting up, whether, I don't know how frequently you meet up with everybody, but just having these different things.
Yeah.
And being able to set aside, like dinners and breakfast and lunch and coffees, and just like any time of day, being able to, drop everything, even when somebody needs, like you were talking about, like
Yeah.
taking those late night calls. And I just think it's just a really cool thing that the Lord is doing. And again, and you've mentioned this, it's not that somebody who is married can't do those same things, but you have a specific freedom and time freedom to your life that
Yeah.
allows the Lord to do things in your life that he just simply can't do in somebody else's life who doesn't have that time freedom. And it does, I mean, there's just something about it that makes it so exciting. It's like, oh my gosh,
Yeah.
like all of this, like instead of wanting to jump over the hurdle of singleness, like all of this potential that's in there that I think we overlook because we idolize relationships
Yes.
so much. Okay, so for women listening right now, what are ways that women can really discover purpose in their singleness? Some of my thoughts that I had is, and we've talked about this too, like the different aspects of like practically what we can do. And I think you've talked about this really well, just like, I think it's just a really big mind shift, a mindset shift. I'm trying to think of
Yeah.
the words there. Yeah. About what singleness is. And I guess I just wanted to add to that, like, no matter who you are or where you are, what relationship status you are in, my thought is the same for like really discovering your purpose in whatever season that is that you are called to glorify God, and love others, be involved in the church, step into talents and desires or things, that God is putting on your heart.
Mm.
But specifically in your singleness, know that you can do that freely, like you've just talked about, without anyone to check in on or all of those things. So
Yeah.
anyway, we've kind of been diving into that, but I just wanted to add that point too, like really diving into how to discover purpose in singleness.
Yes. No, I totally agree. And also like recognize that it's not a plague. We've kind of said that, but I feel like just coming right out and saying it head on, like it's not a plague. You're not less than, you're not unworthy. You're complete in Christ, whatever relational status you have. Like you don't need to be married. A man can't complete you at all. He's going to fail you. As he can be the most incredible man on earth, he's still not going to complete you. He still can't be enough for you. So like just understanding that too, like it's not terrible to be single. Like God can give you everything you need in Jesus, even here, even now in your singleness.
Yeah, no, I love that. Okay, so diving into just the next question that I have, and we've talked about this, like we have this idea, like you said, that it is a plague, it is a hurdle, to kind of get over. And so I think in this conversation, hopefully a lot of women are like, wait a minute, like my singleness has so much potential to serve the Lord, just like marriage does, but just in totally different ways. So how can I tap into that? So for the girl who has always felt like, singleness is that plague or that hurdle to get over, what are, I guess, practical ways that you would help her overcome that feeling, less so like things that she could be doing in her singleness, but more like, overcoming like that striving for that, if that makes sense.
Sure.
Yeah, and not necessarily like wait for her husband, but to take today by the horns, the day that the Lord has given her today.
Yeah, no, I think that is like the start, is like diving into today. It's really easy to worry about tomorrow or to imagine, like look ahead in your life, feel like there's no guy on the horizon. I'm going to look ahead and I'm looking into this abyss of singleness. And it's because you're trying to imagine how you're going to be single 10 years from now. You don't know what God has for you 10 years from now. I don't know what God has for me 10 years from now. We have today, and he calls us to not worry about tomorrow. And I think it starts with just like waking up today and being like, okay, God, where do you want me? Like, what do you have for me to do today? How can I walk? In Ephesians, Paul says that God has good works foreordained for us to walk in. And I love that. But it's for today. So what good works do you have that I can do today that are just for this day that I'm never going to get again? Like time is the one commodity we can never get more of.
Mm,
So how can I take my time today and invest it into your kingdom, invest it into eternity, and grow in Jesus? And like, I think if we start seeking God in that way, if I start pouring my heart into him, running after him, then my focus and my perspective does start to shift, like,
yeah.
because a lot of what it is like I'm seeking, or not, okay, in our culture it's like I'm seeking a man, right? Like I want to seek after finding a guy, like that's the purpose of my life, I'm going to run after that. And if we're seeking after a man, we're not seeking after God, right? Like we can't run after two things, like we have to run after one thing. And if we're running after God, we're guaranteed to find God. If we're running after trying to find a man, we're not guaranteed that. So like seeking God with all of our hearts, souls, minds, and strengths, loving our neighbor as ourself, and just like knowing that he will fulfill us. But I think sometimes it's a real step of faith. Like you might be sitting there and being like, that sounds really good, but it doesn't work for me. But I have to say, like, you have to give yourself completely to that. You have to dive in and choose today. I might want to get married one day, but today God has me
Yeah.
single. So how can I invest today? God, how can I seek you today? How can I walk in the things you have for me today? And as you do that, I can guarantee you he will meet you there and he will
Yeah.
satisfy you. And I'm in my early 30s and I can be like, Jesus is enough. Yeah, it would be awesome to be married one day. I'm not saying like, oh, this is never something I want in my life, but I can also say that he's proven himself faithful over and over and over again. And I know he'll do the same for you. And so I would say like, just look to him and seek him for today, and don't freak out about 15 years from now.
Yeah, no, I love that. I heard similar advice a few years ago too, and just talking about, and I think for me, like real talk, like I think on the day to day, I'm like actively like, okay, like what if I run into somebody today who's going to be my future spouse? And like if I go to this church service and who's going to be there, like all of these things, and almost worrying of like, okay, I have to be like ready for that almost. You know what I mean?
Uh-huh.
I don't know if that makes sense. But yeah, I was very much that way. So realizing, like, okay, because maybe there is this like fear, quote unquote, of like, what does the Lord have for me 15 years
Mm,
from now? Like, I don't know if I can be single 15 years from now. And hearing like, okay, what you actually need to be able to do is to literally just like you said, look at today. And so it made me realize like, okay, today I can decide that I'm not going to be like looking around to see if my potential
yeah.
future spouse is going to be here, and today
Yeah.
I can just like be like present with the girls in girl study, and today I can be like intentional with people at school, and today I can like share the gospel at work, and I can be like really intentional about those things instead of like super focused on whatever potential future might be in each of those situations.
Yeah.
And again, like not that any of those things, like I know girls, and I did it myself, where you like try out a new like church or young adults group to see if there's any other like potential eligible bachelors like in the
Right.
area. And I'm not like coming at any of that, but I think just like
No.
for me at least, I know in my own heart then like was very even just subconsciously like focused on like, okay, like I don't know if I can do this whole next, like I just hope I'm in a relationship by the end of this year, whatever, something like that. And it's like,
Right.
well, the Lord calls you to
Mhm.
like just honor him today. And when you really look at it in that way, and like you said, how we, there are good works preordained for us to be like stepping into,
Yeah.
and recognizing that is just like mind blowing, whether you are single or whether you are married or whatever it is, but recognizing like, okay, like my eyes need to be on the Lord, and that's it, because like
Yes.
there is so much that he could have for me today, and if I'm so focused on being miserable, real talk, then I'm totally going to miss out on that.
Yeah, totally. And like the thing is that excuse me, that relationship's not going to fix my misery.
Yeah.
Ultimately, like for a season, I might feel like a little bit happier, but ultimately like that's a deeper heart issue. Honestly, it's not that a man can make me feel all better. Men aren't perfect, news flash, but like neither are women. But a guy can't fix everything going on. And one of the most tragic things I've seen is girls who think that they're going to find a man who's going to fix all their problems. They rush into a relationship, and 5 years into it, they're miserable. They're married, they have kids now, and they're still miserable because they sought something other than God. And
Yeah.
God's the only one who can satisfy us. He's the only one who can give us like a heart that's content and just full of joy and peace in him. And no man can do that. And I would just encourage you, like, seeking after Jesus really will give you what your heart is longing for. And no man can do that. Like, even if you got every single thing you wanted today, without Christ,
Yeah.
it's gonna fail you. Like, it's just gonna. And Jesus made it that way on purpose, because he wants us to only be fully satisfied when we're with him, because that's how we were created to be.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. And I'm just fleshing out this thought right now. So I don't know if anything I'm about to say is going to make sense. Might edit out the whole thing. But I'm just thinking through, like, I wonder if so much, like we really do idolize, and like you talked about, like these friends that who got married and now are just like in that same kind of miserable quote unquote state that they were before they were married, because marriage wasn't the thing that is supposed to solve the problem. Like
Right.
the issue is Jesus. So I wonder if like what we strive for in a relationship, like what we idolize and we look towards, is like not only the relationship itself, but like maybe how the Lord, like the Lord in that relationship, like what the Lord
Yeah.
meant for relationships to look like, and be, and all of those things, for example, right? So stay with me on track there. So there's that. But then, like, for example, if we don't have the Lord in that, and if we don't have the Lord as our primary focus and like as the end all be all, because that he really is the only end all be all, and that is not in that relationship, then that relationship is never going to really do what we are hoping it does for us, because
Yes.
really the only thing that is going to like help anything is the Lord. And so we could be, and I've heard this too, like happier being single if we have the Lord, versus like, somebody who has quote unquote what we all idolize is this relationship. But if
Yeah.
it's not what the Lord has for us, then like that's just not going to be anything that is going to bring us, joy in any capacity. So really, I
Yeah.
just love that. Like, I think it's so important to recognize and even just remind ourselves of every single day, all day, all the time, is like the Lord is what I need. He is my portion, and he is
Yes.
more than enough. Like I am overflowing with him,
Yes.
and I don't need anything else. And it doesn't mean that we don't want anything else. Like the Lord knows the desires of our hearts, but it does mean that like we don't need anything else. And again, we like can be overflowing, not just like stagnating
Yes.
in singleness or in whatever season we kind of wish we were getting out of, specifically again to the girl who feels like this is just something she wants to hop out of.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if that analogy made sense whatsoever.
No, I followed you.
Okay, good. Maybe you need to watch the video with the hand motions. I don't know. So be sure to check that out if this makes it to YouTube. We'll see how my video editing skills go with my sneeze in the middle there. But yeah, anyways. Okay, so just wrapping up, do you have one bit of encouragement related or unrelated to this topic for the She Lives Purposefully podcast listeners? And yeah, just take it away.
Sure. I think, like, just in tying in with what we've been talking about, I think it really does all come back down to contentment and a settled okayness with where God has me. And if I can't be content, if you can't be content in your singleness, getting married, like we've been talking about, that's not going to fix the issue. So my encouragement is seek God, chase after him with every part of your heart, read your Bible, pray, be in fellowship with other believers, pursue the things he's putting on your heart, walk fully in the purpose he's given you in this day, today in your life. And then if the day comes for you to marry, then like, may your heart be so hidden in God that man first has to seek Jesus in order to find you.
Yeah.
And then like that marriage, that relationship, it's going to be way better than it could ever be. But also, like, if you don't ever get there, if God doesn't have that for you, you're going to be overflowing with joy and peace and just excitement with what God's doing in your life, no
Yeah.
matter what. So that would be my encouragement. Like, seek Jesus, find your contentment in him. And it's like, I feel like sometimes it feels like a Christian answer, but on the side of it of like, here I am probably a little older than a lot of the people listening. And I can say, like,
No,
I'm
you're
so
right in that
thankful.
age. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
perfect. Then I'm great. Then we're right here together. Then I can say, like, every no God has given me, like every relationship I thought I wanted, that I was like seeking, and then he said no to that, and I was heartbroken and crushed. Now I can look back and be so thankful for that. And I
Mm.
can say, like, he brought me through it. He is enough. He is good. He is faithful. And if he brings a guy into my life tomorrow or doesn't, and I die single, I know I'm going to be satisfied in Jesus because he's proven himself faithful over and over again. So I
Mhm.
just want to encourage you that he can do that. He can be enough for you. And my prayer is that, like, you'll find him to be all that he is meant to be in your life.
Yeah, I love that. That is such a sweet encouragement. Too, if you don't mind this question coming out onto the podcast, could you, just because I feel like it gives all of your wisdom more weight, because I think sometimes, if somebody who's 17 and is like, singleness is, great, and then the person who's like 23 is like, don't talk to me, kind of. So like, how old are you? How long have you been single? Kind of all of those really basic questions. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, so I'm 32, but probably by the time this airs, I'll be 33. So yeah, I don't mind talking about how old I am at all. It's fine. I'm actually, I will say to the ones in their 20s, like, I actually really like my 30s better. So
I've heard that so much recently. Actually, like people in the 30s are like, it rocks. Like,
yeah, love
like
my 30s. I
I
think it's
love
like,
it.
oh, it's terrifying to turn 30. Turn 30, you'll love it. It's great. So yeah, so I'm 33. I've been in like minor relationships, never really a big long-term one. But in a lot of ways, I feel like the Lord's kind of kept me in that way, like from having like, it was already really hard when the other stuff ended, but this is like even better because I didn't have that long-term drawn out pain. So, but
Yeah.
yeah, so and like, I know probably like a lot of you, I can look and I don't have a guy in mind. Like, if I look out, there's not like there's all these great options around me. So I do understand, like, looking and being like, oh, there's nothing here. But at the same time, I'm like, you know what? I'm okay with that. I don't really actually have time right now to add a
Mhm.
man into my life. So
Yeah.
yes,
No,
yes.
thank you for sharing that. I feel like, again, I think probably just adds validity to everything that you're saying, because it's not somebody straight out of high school
Yes.
kind of vibe. But yeah, I never know, because I feel like I never really mind sharing my age, but I know, like, I guess eventually, like, it becomes almost like a taboo thing to ask, and I just never really understood
Yeah.
that concept, so I didn't know if it was like a rude question.
No,
um
I don't care.
I don't know. But yeah, anyways, okay, before I let you go, tell us where we can find you, where we can find eventually, like, when your book is coming out, all of those things, and
Sure.
all the good stuff.
Yeah, so you can find me on Instagram at CJ Malacy. My website is cjmalacy.com. And I also have like a cjmalacy.com/SLP for She Lives Purposely followers and everything. So if you go there, you can get like a freebie for
Yay.
listening to this
Okay, I'll
podcast.
link that. Yeah.
Yes. And but yeah, and then my book will be, Lord willing, coming out this fall. So that's the plan right now. So yeah, if you want to find out more about that and everything, you can check that out on my website.
Yeah, and sign up for the newsletter, and
Yeah.
or your emails. Yeah, I love getting those. They're just such a bright spot. Okay, well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. You guys, check Carli out. She is such a solid believer and sweet friend, and somebody that you definitely just want to be in contact with and following, and know that you can, like, just trust, what she's saying, and all that good stuff, which I think can be so rare in this world. So definitely check her out. And again, Carli, thank you so much again for coming on the pod.